You have used definitions so far, such as the definition of congruency. In this section, you will learn how to write definitions as conditional statements. So what is a conditional statement? A conditional statement is a logical statement that contains a hypothesis and a conclusion. If the conditional statement is in the if-then form, then it contains the hypothesis after the word if, and the conclusion comes after the word then. So let's take an example of this conditional statement. It says all hippos are animals. How do we write this in the if-then form? So let's think about what the hypothesis is. It helps me to think of what happens first, time-wise. So before a hippo can be a mammal, it has to be a hippo. And a hippo is an animal. So I could write this in the form, if an animal is a hippo, so let's write this here. If an animal is a hippo, then it is a mammal. So this is how we write a conditional in the if-then form. Conditionals can be true or they can be false. If they're true, then they need to be true for all cases. A conditional statement can be proven wrong by using only one counterexample. So let's look at this conditional statement, and in this conditional statement, let's identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. We said the hypothesis comes after the if, so this is the hypothesis. And the words following then form the conclusion. In the statement, if a number is a fraction, then it is negative. The hypothesis is a number is a fraction. The conclusion is it is negative. So the question for us is this conditional statement true or false? Well, it's hard to take 5 million cases and try to prove it true. So can we find a counterexample to prove it false? So I am going to pick a fraction, any fraction. So let's pick the fraction 2 over 7. Now 2 over 7 is a fraction, but it certainly doesn't have to be negative. So therefore this conditional statement is false, and my reasoning is 2/7 is a fraction, but it is positive. A conditional statement can be written as in 3 other forms, and the other forms are converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So let's take a conditional statement. Let's take the conditional statement. If you are a soccer player, if you are a soccer player, then you are an athlete. Okay, so that's our original conditional statement. Let's go ahead and highlight the hypothesis which follows the word if, and we'll also highlight the conclusion which follows the word then. So converse, what's a converse? In a converse, you switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the converse here is going to be if you are an athlete, then you are a soccer player. The inverse is obtained by negating the hypothesis and conclusion in the original conditional. Negating means putting a not, so we say if you are not a soccer player, then you are not an athlete. And finally, we have the contrapositive. And the contrapositive is a combination of the converse and the inverse. Contrapositive. 2 words, 2 actions. Switch the hypothesis and the conclusion and negate them both. Or you can just look at the inverse and switch it. So we say if you are not an athlete, then you are not a soccer player. So what we've done here is we've taken a conditional and we have written 3 other forms of it, which is the converse, switch, hypothesis and conclusion, inverse, negate hypothesis and conclusion, contrapositive, switch hypothesis and conclusion and negate them both. When 2 statements are, just bring this here, when 2 statements are both true or both false, we call them equivalent statements. Let me repeat. Both the statements are either true or they are false. So let's look at the example above. In the conditional, if you are a soccer player, then you're an athlete. I want to say that that is true. So I'm going to put a true here. Okay, if you're an athlete, then you're a soccer player. That is not true. That is false, because you could be a cricket player. If you're not a soccer player, then you're not an athlete. That is also false, because I could be playing some other sport. So this is false also. The contrapositive, if you're not an athlete, then you're not a soccer player, is true. This is true. Okay, I want to make sure that we can read this. This is false. Now look at the conditional and its contrapositive. They are both true and they are equivalent statements. Also look at the converse and the inverse. They are both false. So they are also equivalent statements. In the case of a definition is a conditional statement where both the conditional and the converse are true. I like to think of it as a conditional statement that is true both forwards and backwards. So let's take a look at the following definition of perpendicular lines. Okay, and maybe we can draw a sketch to help us out. That's one perpendicular line, and it is intersected by another perpendicular line. Well, actually these are segments, but I can easily make them lines. If you remember, lines go on forever. So now we have two lines, and just you can label lines with lowercase letters. I'm going to call them L and M. You already know you can use two capital letters, which are 2 points on the line, to label a line. So perpendicular lines, what's the definition? If two lines intersect to form 4 right angles, actually if they intersect to form and they only form 1 right angle, it follows that the other 3 will be right angles also. So the definition is, if two lines intersect to form 4 right angles, then they are perpendicular lines. So what's the converse of that? The converse is you switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. If two lines are perpendicular lines, note now the word perpendicular is part of the hypothesis. Then they intersect to form 4 right angles. And this is a definition which is true both backwards and forwards. Let's talk about a biconditional. A biconditional statement can be written when a conditional statement and its converse are both true.